I get why people like this show. It's got fun action, some characters you are interested in, you want to follow, but I feel like it's the bare minimum we should expect from a video game adaptation or a prime time TV show with this budget. But it's also derivative to other adventures, westerns to a fault in some ways. And yeah, I mean, overall, to me, it just felt kind of mediocre. It never really quite reached the heights of something like The Last of Us adaptation. Didn't quite have that emotional heft. In comparison, this is more of a popcorn flick. And I think a lot of the problems with the show are exemplified in its first episode, which I think kind of put its worst foot forward in the first episode. The pacing was just inconsistent, but it does pick up later on. It gets better as the show goes on, and it turns out to be just probably a solid 7 out of 10 show. The show begins at the end, which is pretty clever because I think the last episode it's called The Beginning, and I did like the intro to the show, basically setting up the idea that hey, this what 1950s 1960s era alternate reality in which a nuclear war occurred and pretty much decimated most of the surface. Yeah, I think this was an effective intro, and of course, Walter Goggins without the ghoul makeup. I think he's a strong lead in this show, but I do feel like his best moments are in the before times. But then we get to the heart of the show, really, Lucy here, the moral compass. I think she does a good job. I think her story as like a fish out of water story out in the wasteland as she explores the outside world. This world of Fallout, I guess it's a little bit of a send up, a little bit critique of the whole McCarthyism, nuclear family, the American dream, the white picket fence American dream of the 50s. So far, it's so good with this first episode. It's really when the vine starts to kick in that I kind of roll my eyes a bit with the whole slow motion effect. It comes off as a little pretentious and trying to be too cool, especially with the use of the old timey music to make it try to elevate it. The incongruence with the old timey music with the slow mo action. If you're gonna do it, maybe not indulge in it too much because then it loses its impact. This whole sequence here was just kind of like a bore for me. I was like, okay, let's get this over with. But I guess it establishes what's at stake here, opens up the main character's eyes here, Lucy. Things aren't all peachy. And then the show doesn't do itself any favors by switching over to another story, to another character. This whole story bit here, this whole storyline, I think, is the weakest of the whole series. It's your standard military drama here with the soldier who's being picked on, dialogue, and some of the acting is just like undercooked here. Once we get to the wasteland is I think when it works better for us to like expand and start looking at other characters. And that's kind of like a flaw of TV storytelling a lot of times. It's just trying to be too expansive, uh, bouncing back between too many storylines, too many things, and like it can be done well, and it has been done well a lot. But I think this episode in particular, an example of how not to do it. The idea of exploring a post-apocalyptic wasteland, is just inherently interesting and captivating, especially from the perspective of a vault dweller. So I did want to see, what Lucy was going to encounter. In episode 2, we have Max here on a mission with his knight. He's already he's become the official squire, and then this is where I feel like we could have just started with his character. This whole sequence with the knight in the armor getting chomped on by this bear, and then the squire helping out, but not to the extent to saving him. This was just enough to give us a backstory to Max's character. Like this whole scene gives us enough exposition to like who Maximus is and what his motivations are. We could have had a flashback of maybe some of his training in the military camps, him getting beat up, whatever. Like that would have been great, but like this we already have a flashback here. They could have just cut off the whole intro in the beginning, in the first episode of him. This is plenty. This is plenty. I like this whole little sequence here, and that would have helped the pacing a lot of the first episode. But it's really when she gets into town that the series starts to work a lot better for me. This could have been a good intro to the ghoul here. Did it really need that graveyard scene? I don't think so. So then, this little interaction here is what kind of sold it to me, and really, like, maybe I will continue to watch this series, because the clerk here calls out the class dynamics here. Basically, Lucy representing a privileged elite who get to hide and live comfortably away from the real world, in which people are suffering and trying to make ends meet, while the clean, privileged rich get to live the happy American dream in their bunkers. You could extrapolate this to represent the reality in which people, middle class, upper class, suburban, gated communities even reap the benefits of capitalism, while the working class or people exploited in other countries are worked to the bone to provide all the material comforts, for people like Lucy here. Of course, it's this fantasy post-apocalyptic world, but I think a lot of viewers can see the reference and metaphor here for reality. And then then we get the Western shootout scene, the classic Western shootout, and it does lean into its video game roots here by doing some slow motion. There's some shots here that I feel like are reminiscent of the I guess the VAT system in the video games, where time slows down. In comparison to the slow-mo action from the vault sequence in the first episode, I think this one's done better. It plays to the strength of the genre. It does feel a little bit indulgent at times too, with the violence. The best moment really of this scene is the ghoul getting shot here, and just like shrugging it off, and then getting to cover here, and just like nonchalantly. I guess it's also kind of reminiscent of a video game logic. This violence that sometimes it just seems like, again, like, oh, maybe the stakes aren't as high because we know it's just a bunch of goofy, over the top violence. That when characters are in danger, are they really in danger? And then later on, she gets stabbed, and she uses like one of those video game syringes that like just heals her up real quick. It would be nice to kind of understand how the technology works. Like, this is not a video game, it's a show. So like, how does one cure themselves so quickly by just injecting a needle in them with some magic health potion or something? Maybe the adaptation should have like tried to ground the world a little bit more, because sometimes it just feels too hokey and too video gamey, and it kind of just throws me out of the world a little bit sometimes. I did like the interactions between Max's new squire, and the whole idea of like, oh, him now feeling like he has the power now to dominate one of those tales of power corrupting. I think this actor did a good job. He offered some good comedic relief to the show here. And then this bridge sequence in particular, I think, kind of demonstrates the viewpoint of the series, a cynical viewpoint that everyone on top in the wasteland are out for themselves. Very, very individualistic idea of the post-apocalypse. It also kind of lacks a bit of imagination that there's going to be more cooperative communities out there, that there is hope in humanity to some extent. There's going to be some communities that are going to be more cooperative. Something at least like in the Last of Us show, another post-apocalyptic show, there was at least that commune in Jackson, and a representation of, hey, like there's good in humanity. There's some people who are going to work together for the better good that lifts everybody up together equally, and instead of pitting everyone against each other. Well, I guess the Vault Dwellers down here are representative of a false type of democracy, um, one that's seemingly a democracy, but in reality is controlled by corporate machinations. In the before times, Cooper here, Walter Goggins' character, before he became the Ghoul, was invited to this secret meeting here that sort of represents like communist meetings back during McCarthyism days in Hollywood. I was hoping that they would actually get into more of the actual communist or socialist politics here. It turns out, she's not really interested in any like political revolution. She wants her tech back, which is basically the cold fusion technology that she developed that would provide near infinite energy for society. And in this world, Vault-Tec has bought up and decided to make sure they can make a profit. She says she's not a communist herself. She just says it's a dirty word that they use to describe people who aren't insane. Basically, just a word to insult their enemies. Of course, this is a show on Amazon streaming service, Amazon being a monopolizing force that has wiped out a lot of like smaller businesses in its time. Much more closer to the enemies she's against, the actual big bads in this series, the big Vault-Tecs and such. Amazon has also produced I'm a Virgo from Boots Riley, identified communist himself. So, it's not like Amazon has to be self-aware. As long as their media is in the zeitgeist and they're gaining subscribers and getting ad revenue, that's all that matters to them. It would be nice if this show had a little bit more bite, like I'm a Virgo had, and maybe actually address some real consequences to this corporate dystopia that this Fallout show is based on, besides, the generic post-apocalyptic tropes, and maybe give a voice to some revolutionary communists or even anarchist factions. I think also, Nolan and Lisa Joy, who are behind this, are not so much interested in that and are satisfied enough with some anti-capitalist critique without really going into a possible alternative, and so here the big secret was revealed. Lucy's dad was actually part of Vault-Tec. He's the one behind her mother's death. He was trying to do it for the good of humanity, etc., etc. But of course, he was just focused on preserving, his company's goals. The idea that they can create the perfect society through their methods, at the expense of the rest of humanity. And then the biggest reveal of all is we find out that all these huge companies have been in cahoots with each other. In fact, they were the ones responsible for the first bomb dropping in the first place in order for their Vault experiment to succeed and create a better society with them at the helm. Turns out Cooper's wife is the one who suggests that they drop the bombs themselves. And then also in this scene, there's that reveal that Lucy's dad was part of the company. And we get probably one of the worst de-aging effects I've seen. It looks kind of like they deep faked Kyle MacLachlan's younger self onto his current body, but it doesn't quite really mesh well. It does look off. I think particularly like his jawline just doesn't match well. Like it looks goopy. It doesn't look convincing to me, and it does jolt me. Kind of takes me out of the moment. You'd think that a company as big as Vault-Tec, I mean Amazon, could afford some better effects here. It would have worked out better and probably even cheaper if they just freaking used makeup. They could have used makeup, maybe different lighting or something. It would have been less immersion breaking. I guess at the end here, these big companies kind of just become these Bond villains, which are a bit detached from reality and a bit apolitical, which is a bit of distraction from the real world corporate villains. And then we get more of the climactic action scenes with the Brotherhood landing at the observatory. At the very end, Lucy's father takes the armor from Max and gets away, now becoming probably the main villain of the story. Lucy turns against him. The ghoul confronts Lucy's dad once again. Sees him for the first time in a while. I guess couldn't quite pull the trigger here fast enough. It's a little bit odd how he gets away so easily. At this point, Lucy has completed somewhat of a character arc. She realizes now what she grew up to believe in is like all false, and the world is a harsh and dangerous place, and she has to go and find a way to make it better now, I guess. But now she's a little bit more jaded, getting a little bit closer to the worldview of the ghoul here, who has lost everything. Now he's like at least has some hope that he can find his family again. Or he even alluded to early on that Lucy's gonna look just like him in the future. Gonna be just like him, and she seems to be going on that path. But I feel like she's still gonna have that optimism, have that hope for humanity, have those principles that maybe she can help bring about a better world like her mother was trying to do in Sandy Shores. And then we got Max coming to. Moldaver comes in all wounded, and when his soldier buddies come in, they assume he's the one who took down Moldaver, and he becomes a hero. He's basically given the power of this cold fusion now, and he's in control. We'll see how he'll make use of it in the coming seasons. I imagine he's gonna, like he did with the armor, he'll be lured by that power and maybe will become somewhat of a villain, or perhaps a corrupted hero as the head or a leader in the Brotherhood. And we get a little tease of Kyle MacLachlan's character walking into the sunset, approaching New Vegas. It would appear that the ghoul and Lucy aren't too far behind. And we're going to have a fun time on the Vegas Strip next season, it would seem. And that's season 1. Yeah, I think maybe, it was a little bit too reliant on the tropes of the genre, too reliant on some of that slow motion action with that 50s music. The first episode was pretty rough, I think, with the pacing was inconsistent. The Brotherhood storyline was kind of a bore for me. Also, the humor was a bit hit or miss for me. I guess I appreciate that there was some funny bits here and there, but it just wasn't consistent. Like the cousin incest joke in the first episode, that was just kind of awkward, And then some of the goofy characters just didn't deliver their lines well enough, or sometimes it just felt, in general, out of place. But, to each their own. But we had some good performances from Walton Goggins and Ella Purnell. It was a decent adaptation. I think maybe majority of Fallout fans would enjoy it just because it wasn't awful, it wasn't shit, it wasn't the worst thing out there, and maybe people were expecting, worse than it turned out to be, so they'll be satisfied with it. But me, I always want to see a deeper examination of the politics of a post-apocalypse. I want to see more revolutionary figures actually trying to transform the world in a meaningful way in order to benefit everyone, not just a world mired in cynical individualism. So maybe we'll get to see that in future seasons. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not one of those Fallout video game fans, so I don't know exactly all the lore and stuff behind everything. Well, see y'all next time. Hopefully, not in the post-apocalypse. There's some tension out there still brewing. Wars continue to go on, and the doomsday clock is ticking. Bye.